And what I want to do is, and we can't cover it all, but we want to zero in on a couple of chapters. One, the family chapter, and there's a chapter, it's called, what is it? What's the name of it? Why can't we form strong families? Right? There's an assumption in there that we can't form strong families. And then there's the other one about why do we conform to black sexual stereotypes. That one, that theme, that set of themes, I'd like to tease those out for a few minutes. And then I'd like to look at the homicide. He calls it homicide, which I don't like, but homicide and suicide, slow suicide, the ways in which we destroy ourselves, are self-destructive. And then finally, I would like to look at the chapter that talks about why can't we do things together? Why is there such a problem in terms of disunity in our community? And just want to go around the table, and if we can just sort of take them as you will for the next 5 minutes or so. Let's just talk about each of those chapters, what was sort of the central point that you think he was trying to make about families, and about the violence, and then about the unity.
If I can possibly attack or discuss the family chapter, it's unfortunate that I guess we've come to this place in our lives where men are not a part of the family structure. I remember reading a number of years ago. They were talking about, it was an article dealing with the influences that were on children's lives. And it started with the family, and it also had church, and it had teachers, school. And here we are 20, 30 years later, and now the influence is television. And friends, and maybe parents. There is no minister, there is no church. Teachers are further down the list, and going through the book, and having been involved in education as I have, you see the problem, and you see where that breakdown begins to start. Along with the fact that now, in some instances, there are not as many fathers in homes as there needs to be, and it all plays a part. It all plays a part, and it's sad. It's unfortunate. This book is very important. This is one of the reasons why we do. As Tom said earlier, this book could serve as a guideline for people to sit down and possibly reorganize their families or get families on a different track.
And also understand why the situation is the way it is. That it was designed to be that way. It's part of the brainwashing to not have black women trust black men, not have black men trust black women, not being able to rely on each other. And so those slavery ends, and we're sort of titularly free, but we never get rid of that notion that we can't trust one another in some fundamental sense. And for me, it's very interesting, slavery ends, we're not aware of the power of the mind and the power of emotions and psychology, and so we just keep moving, and we think we're free. What we don't understand, that those emotional things, those patterns, those behaviors keep coming down to us.
And the sad thing, not to cut you off, the sad thing is that, as you said, some of us realize we're free. Many of us were content to stay on the plantation. Many of us are content to this very day to be on the plantation. So that freedom was kind of fleeting. That freedom was only meant for some of us. So, even when we deal with the percentages of people who actually experienced it, who actually enjoyed that freedom, I don't know what the numbers were. I don't know what the numbers are today.
In terms of
people who are reaching out and grasping, reaching out and educating themselves, reaching out and having conversations, as opposed to people who, for fear of the greater power structure, would just be content to stay in their homes and not have conversations and not to discuss things. The book is good.
I think relating to the family and kind of how we're all in disarray, we're still reorganizing and trying to re-identify with what has happened to the African American male. I myself, I'm a single father myself, and if the challenges that we often face in being black men out there could be shared with the greater black community that often feels it's alienated or by itself dealing with its issues, we'd find a sense of family again. It's something we only read about now in my generation, or we look to our grandparents to demonstrate what it is to exemplify what a black strong family is, you know. And I look at my grandparents, they're in their late 80s, and they've been together the whole time, you know. Where now, you know, the trend is, you know, if you don't feel it's right, let it go, you know. And then you look at our communities and you say, well, do we feel good about how our communities are? You know, and what is the action to take because of that? And
what is the impact on our children to have families so disconnected and so dispersed and not available to each other? I think the impact is profound.
And he made
please.
He made in regards to the family issue, he made a valid point when he said that these maladaptive behaviors that we're having, that we're continuing to exhibit, we're going to continue to produce generations of dysfunctional children and so forth. So the family structure, it's disrupted, and there's no harmony and so forth, and there's no unity because of the effects of the psyche, individual psyche, the things that you see visually, the things that have been passed on to you, the effects of slavery. None of those psychological effects have been treated. None of them. I mean, he talked about the overbearing mother and the emotionally immature black male and so forth, but like we discussed in slavery, a lot of times to protect your child, to protect that strong black male, you know, you see the slave master comes in and say, yeah, he's growing up nice and strong, nice and healthy, and it's like, no, he's no good, no, he's terrible. And so through time you continue to beat down verbally, you know, and then, you know, the physical and things of that nature. So with human behavior being learned behavior, we tend to pick up behaviors of other individuals, especially those who
let's spend a couple of minutes on solutions with regard to the family. What does he suggest that we do to address this problem, and what do we think we need to do to address the problem of the brokenness of our families?
Share one of these recommendations, if you would.
Well, one of the recommendations is to really highlight what you're talking about, your grandparents, to highlight the fact that there are families that are intact and positive, and but there seems to be sometimes a resistance to that because that's not the norm in our family, and so in our community, and so there seems to be, you know, no, that's not our norm. Therefore, we don't want to, you know, lift that up. And it becomes problematic. But it is absolutely the case that children in two-parent families do well, do better.
And I think you're getting at one thing that's getting in the way, because there's throughout our community the belief, well, a woman can raise a child alone, and it's okay. But so as long as that's our mindset and our perspective, the situation isn't going to change. So the first solution is to realize, you know, we did an awakening in our community that family is important, two-parent families are important, that fathers are important, and that we need to relearn the skills of courtship and marriage and parenting.
I wanted to comment really into the solution for family, and after the healing is done, it's definitely important, and I even think maybe even during that we advocate for how we've been affected by public policy. When you think about African American males, the incarceration rates and having a criminal record, and maybe the possibility based on how our people's condition is, you might be in Section 8 housing or HUD approved housing, and that gentleman can't reside in a house where his child might live. that's an old practice, and it's still conducted now. And so, in addition to a lot of the issues that he addressed in Brainwash, I think it's important for our people to be critical of ourselves, but be realistic as to the fact that we did not bring ourselves here, we didn't condition ourselves to be in the state that we are in, and that we're trying to find a solution where we find that there's really not too many options.
And we may not have done it, we may not have conditioned ourselves, but it's only we who can free our minds, as Bob Marley
I
said.
think we need to know that how. I think it's important to know how systematically it was structured for us.
And that's what's good about this book.
Yeah,
gives a good
in
framework.
reference to what Michael said, in the HUD housing and Section 8 and so forth, even after was the post-civil civil rights movement, or I think it was after slavery and so forth, and when they started the whole social services dependency, I've heard stories, the generation gap. Have you heard the stories? You hear somebody from the city or from the state and so forth going into certain individuals' houses and so forth, and what is this man doing here and so forth? Whose male clothing is this? Whose shoes are these? Whose jacket is this? And we told you he's not supposed to be here. So it's systematic, and that's why I say a lot of these things are hidden. We don't even know. And then in this day and age, you talk to maybe somebody who may be a product of that time frame or that era and so forth, they say, well, those things don't happen anymore, or that didn't happen. How could you not?
Yeah.
How could you say that something happened and and we want to ignore everything? You can't. You have to. You have to.
Yeah, because now we have our young parents justifying the absence of a father, and where that started wasn't an idea of ours.
We even have women who go and would like to conceive and just have the male not be anywhere present. They actually go and say, I want a child, but I don't want the man around. How do you say that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But I think it's so important that we understand the backdrop, the context for our condition as we look around and we say things are not as they should be. And I don't know anybody who could say things are as they should be in the Black community. There's no way. And so we have to find an explanation.
Right.
And this is the most powerful, not this book, but the miseducation of the Negro, the lie of Black inferiority, the emotional legacies of slavery. For me, those are the most powerful explanations for why a people that is so strong and so powerful and so beautiful would think so little of themselves. All right? So and so we have to find a way to unbrainwash ourselves.
Right.
Deprogramming.
And so the question then becomes, the most important thing we need to do in terms of solution, I think, is to be honest and stop hiding, stop justifying, stop,
I think the first thing we need to do, we need to turn off the television.
Nice story, nice. Why do we need to turn off the television?
Well, between the television, the radio, there's so many, we're being constantly bombarded by
And brainwashed.
so many outside influences. And until we're able to filter a lot of that out. In my home, when my children were young, we turned off the television Monday through Wednesday. The television went on for Bill Cosby, and that was it. And I think they did watch television on weekends. But it allowed them to have conversations.
Right.
It allowed them to talk.
Read,
it allowed them to read. It allowed them to listen. It gave us an opportunity. It disturbs me so when I see people walking down the street with their young children and they're on a phone.
Tuned out.
Personally, unless it's Obama on the phone, who you need to talk to? I mean, you have an opportunity to talk with your child. You have an opportunity to mold your child's mind.
Guide.
What did you do today in school? And I mean, I don't even want to go off on that, but one of the things that needs to happen is we need to begin to filter and screen out so much information that we're so constantly bombarded with.
We are in a hostile culture. I mean, this is what some of our parents in the old days knew, that we were in a hostile culture and we needed to protect ourselves and our children from it. Let's talk about the violence piece for a second. What is he saying about violence? I mean, how many homicides did we have last year?
34.
34.
And mostly Black people.
Yeah.
Killing other Black people. And this is repeated throughout our country, throughout the world, sadly. What's going on?
I think folks have so much pent up rage and anger that easily triggered to explode in rage, and couple that with guns being readily available, and you end up with the murders.
And where
that
does
you
the
talked
where does the
about.
pent-up rage come
Pent-up
from?
rage is from being raised in a fatherless home, feeling as though there's no opportunity, knowing that so many around you have been murdered, that you have little hope for the future.
You know, I was going to say.
Sometimes not liking what you see in the
Yeah.
mirror.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
very good point.
You know, being a black man in America myself, I can say the pent-up rage that I might have felt before changing my mind, of course, and kind of thinking things over.
And we're glad you did.
Was a result of powerlessness.
Right.
You know, my mom might call me the man of the house. You know, my son might call me father and dad, but the world looks at me less than, and they have no place for me. And then so we often say we make our own way, and we do make the best of it, but I think that we have so much more to offer, and there's something to be upset about when you're not allowed to share it.
I just want to jump in and say that you're listening to OneWorld's Education Agenda, and our topic is Brainwashed, Challenging the Myth of Black Inferiority by Tom Burrell. Jill.
But I wanted to ask Michael, you said before you rethought things in a different way. You know, how did that transformation happen? Because that might be helpful to someone else listening.
Well,